Yeah, I'm going to be sharing some work I've done about AI, hopefully inform you, learn from you. It's based on work I've done under a National Science Foundation project. Here's an opening thought for us all, going back to Greek myths. Pandora was presented with a box, and she knew it was inside, and she opened the box, and unfortunately, hope remains in the box. But what escaped was everything bad and evil and unhappy. And so I think we're in a moment like that. Like, we're seeing this box, we're not quite sure what's inside of it. We want hope to be what's inside of it, and we have to be concerned about other things as well. I also want to recognize that you as attendees are coming to this conversation today relating to AI in different ways. Some of you are really excited to move forward. You want to open the box, you want to get going, put things into practice. Others are, well, I just want to learn more about AI. I'm not so sure yet. And I think a good number of you are probably like, I have my strategy, I have my goals, I know where I want to take my district, my schools, my educators. And is this going to help me get there? Or is this a distraction from my essential work? Well, we won't answer all that today, but I just want to acknowledge that there's people coming into the conversation from lots of different angles. And I want to share with you a little bit how educators are feeling about AI. So yesterday, we had the pleasure of sharing a report that I'll talk about shortly with a webinar audience of about 1,200 educators. And in part of that conversation yesterday, we asked them to contribute words for the emotion they were feeling about AI. And it made this word cloud for us. And I thought it was fascinating how the word cloud came up. And it does seem true that this is how educators are responding today. There is excitement out there. There's energy. Educators, I think, came out of the pandemic, and some of them were not so excited about technology at all. It wasn't necessarily a great experience, but they're excited now. They're curious, but they're also cautious. So I like how the excitement has curious on one side of it and has cautious on the other side of it. And you'll see a mix of hopeful words here, and you'll see the range of how people are feeling: uncertain, overwhelmed, empowered, worried about misuse, anxious, worried about hype. So I think this is, as you as educational leaders are talking to your constituents, it's good to keep this range of emotions in mind, and that people are feeling excited and optimistic in some ways, but worried about risks in other ways. A nice little resource at the bottom. This is a Walton Family Foundation report that documented some of this range of emotions. I also wanted to offer just a little bit about who I am. I know, Dave, you provided a lot, so I won't dwell on this. But I had the good fortune to study AI in education around 1985 or so. I was an undergraduate in computer science at MIT. And so this is a conversation, it feels really new, AI in education, but the first research papers about AI in education were from 1970. So it's actually been talked about and studied for 50 years. There's journals out there titled AI in Education. There are conferences. There are people who have the title, their professor title. So a lot's been going on. Of course, also generative AI is pretty new. But then I decided I was more interested in people than computers. So I went into the learning sciences to really study how people learn. And presently, and more recently, I'm going fast here, I lead a hub for researchers who are separately funded by grants from the National Science Foundation. And we noticed, I've run that hub for about 10 years, and we noticed about 4 to 5 years ago, AI was just starting to take off in the work people were doing. So we knew something was coming because we could just see the shift to everyone focusing on AI. And I want to share a resource with you that Circles has a component called Educator Circles, where we work with practitioners. And there's a lovely AI glossary there of AI terms. There's also a really nice collection of blogs there. And so that's in red. I mentioned the Engage AI Research Center I'm in, and we were talking just before this. Digital Promise runs a League of Innovative Schools. It has about 150 districts in it. And I've been leading the engagement with superintendents in the league around AI. So a lot going on there. I just wanted to give you a little background. And here's the main source I'll be talking from today. Many of you may have had a chance to look at this. It's a report released by the US Department of Education, AI and the Future of Teaching and Learning. I provided the link to where you can download it there. And if you go to that download, the report itself is pretty long, but there's also a core messages doc there, which is much shorter. So depending on how much time you have, you can read one, read the other, read both. And the report is quite thorough. Like I said, we had the pleasure of supporting the department to produce this report. So it includes research, but it's also really built on listening sessions. Last summer, we had 4 listening sessions. Over 750 educators came to those listening sessions, and they just gave us a breadth of information about how they were seeing AI. And this is before ChatGPT was even hitting the scene. And so we had a lot of public input into this. And it's both research, but it's also input from practice shaped the report. So I'm going to be talking a lot about that today. And one way I want to start talking about it is to share this metaphor, which has caught people's imaginations, I believe. I'll read it to you. We envision a technology-enhanced future, more like an electric bike and less like robot vacuums. On an electric bike, the human's fully aware and fully in control, but their burden is less and their effort is multiplied by the support they get. So I currently live in Washington, D.C., and there are electric bikes that you can just rent on the street. And I really like riding the electric bikes because when I ride an electric bike, I'm in control. I get to steer. I get to decide where we're going, when we're going to slow down. But hey, I'm almost 60. I am 60 years old. It's a lot easier to have that support to help me go to where I want to go. Whereas the robot vacuums, you kind of set and forget, but you're not necessarily in charge. They're doing something while you're sleeping. And I worry more about that sort of analogy. Now, why do I start here? Because in talking to you as leaders, I think you set a big tone by how you approach this topic. Are you going into the language of substituting AI for people, which I think can cause a lot of worries? Teachers can worry about, will they be replaced? Or are you leaning into this discourse of augmenting what people do, of supporting people, of enabling teachers to have more satisfying jobs and to do more for their students? And I think the e-bike analogy is just a great way to have that conversation. I also want to say that I'm not talking today just about ChatGPT, in part because we've had 50 years of this, and AI is more than the ability to generate text automatically, however striking that is. But we're also seeing advantages in accelerated things happening in things like natural language processing. In other words, talking to voice assistants. There's a lot in the area of automated planning and scheduling, which can be really important for school operations and in optimization. And in robotics, for example, and people working on social robots that interact with people to help students learn. And so I'm not going to go through each part of this, but in framing this report, we have to realize it's not just essay writing. It's not just essay writing. There are more advances coming our way, and they're coming our way in different parts. And actually, the underlying technologies are not all one thing. AI is really a collection of related advances, not just one specific company or one specific tool. So what is it? How can we say what it is? And again, I think this is kind of important. We struggled in listening to people to find the language that was least mystifying about what AI is. And as leaders, I think you have a chance to set that tone of, are we going to approach this in a mystifying way, or are we going to try to understand how this stuff works? And basically, we chose the language of associations and automations. By associations, we mean the way AI works, it takes a huge data set and it looks for patterns in the data. It can be an if this, then that pattern, like a causal pattern, or it can be a correlation. And it's just really sophisticated at noticing patterns, giving enough data. And on the other side, it can automate things. For example, writing text, but also making a lesson plan and all sorts of things, generating images. So it's the combination of associations and automations that is really new in what's going on with generative AI. And in some ways, there's not that much more to it. And by understanding that, we can understand the shifts that are occurring, and we can also understand the dangers. So the shifts are, most of our historic ed tech was about capturing data or letting us analyze data, giving us dashboards, but it didn't really make inferences about the data. And today's generative AI is suggesting patterns, it's recognizing patterns, and that's a step up. And the second thing is, while our prior ed tech helped us give access to instructional resources, for example, now there's a lot more of automating decisions about teaching and learning that's possible. And you can see the risk go up when we go to these levels. When we can detect patterns automatically and make inferences, those patterns might be unfair or biased, and that could be worrisome. When we automate decisions, they could be bad decisions, but they could scale really rapidly. And we should be worried about that. That could cause bad effects. And there's this huge feeling of acceleration as this is occurring. And that's sort of the mix we're in right now. So associations and automations as a way to think about what AI really is. By the way, when you use ChatGPT, that's what's going on. It has statistical data about what words follow what other words in enormous data sets, and it's automating how to write a next word given the prior words. It's a little more complicated than that, but really, it's just really using statistics about huge data sets of text in order to do what it does. Let me go to the next slide here. This is a slide that might be helpful in thinking about some of the things that are newly possible. For example, shifts in how we provide input from typing to speaking. We can draw. Machine learning can analyze images and videos. And we're shifting in the way we process data from just displaying information, sequencing learning activities, to making plans and providing assistance. We're supporting conversations, not just providing canned text or images or showing a video, maybe synthesizing videos. You can go into more detail with this in the report, so I won't go for too long. But what generative AI is really doing is it's letting us go from putting stuff that already exists in a specific order, deciding when to present it, that's more the old personalized technology, actually creating new images, new experiences, new code that didn't exist before. That's the big difference. So given all that, what are the priority educational opportunities? I think this is a thing that I've heard asked a lot, like, there's so much here, but what should we be really focusing on? And I think we need to focus on our educational goals. It's what we need to focus on. And so one that's just really become important, and we see it in the enthusiasm of the educators, is teachers have tough jobs, and they're using generative AI to save time and also to increase their focus on students. And further, they have a lot of creativity that they can apply better because of what the technology can do. Now, Rachel's going to give a bunch of stories, so I'm not going to go into huge detail, but I will share one that Christina Ishmael shared yesterday at our webinar, where an unfortunate thing happened and a student's parents died. And the school leader had a lot of things they had to do because of that. One of them was to write a letter, and those letters are really hard to write. And they decided to get a draft going using one of these tools and then refine it. And the cool thing was about that is the school leader reported that might have taken her 4 hours if she had to do that all herself. But instead, she did it more quickly and could actually drive out to visit with the student and really meet with the student and support their needs. So that's the kind of thing that I think we're looking at. Can we help save teachers time where it's less necessary, but let them refocus on students? Another key goal when we talk about students is, can we better address the variability that students have through these new modes of interacting, letting students speak if they can't type conveniently, or creating images if reading the text or listening to something isn't working for them? Can we be more adaptive to really the full range of learners? And the third area in the report, so it's teachers, students, and learner and assessments is the order I'm going in here, is we know assessments don't really measure everything that matters. So can we get closer to measuring what really matters? And can we create better feedback loops that provide information to students and information to teachers that help them help learning be better. And so anyway, these are, I think, three broad priority areas where it makes sense to think about applying these technologies. It's not going to get you down to the specific applications, but we do need to start with a combination of what are our educational priorities and where might this technology actually help us make a leap forward. And on the flip side, we just need to be cognizant of risks. And so I'm giving one example here. We can be, in fact, some schools are, providing voice assistance to teachers, or maybe teachers are using something like ChatGPT to write lesson plans or do other things. Well, when that happens, in order to provide really customized assistance, the teachers or others are going to be putting in data that's personal to them or local to their circumstance. And so that technology is acquiring more personal data. And that can lead to teacher surveillance. And so there's this trade-off between, do we want to have really customized assistance? We're going to provide lots of personal data, but we're going to risk just teacher surveillance, or we're going to provide very little. And these are just going to be hard things to decide on and manage. I'm going to zoom out more generally to this document, which was produced by the White House Office of Science and Technology, which describes the risks of AI using 5 categories. And I think it's really helpful because like 5 is a number, but fits on one hand. So we can keep in mind 5 things. And what I really want to call attention to here is, as leaders, you are used to the middle one, for sure. You know that ed tech can create data privacy and security concerns, and we need to protect our students, our teachers, our communities from the risks of data privacy, data loss, etc. But there's 4 other things on this page. The first one, of course, super important, AI ought to be safe. It shouldn't cause harm. How could it cause harm? Well, if a student puts something in and they get back something really inappropriate, that could be harmful. And it should be effective. Well, in any ed tech, we want to have research that establishes efficacy, that it really works, that it improves learning. And AI is pretty new, so we don't have a lot of that data yet. So those are things we need to start thinking about, is how do we get that? Second one talks about bias, that when we automate decisions, it could discriminate against some groups of students, perhaps unintentionally or unexpectedly. We have to be on the lookout for bias creeping in to those patterns or those automations that I was talking about earlier. The fourth one is AI shouldn't be used with people invisibly. They should know AI is being used in a decision-making system and how it might affect them. Transparency. And the fifth one, really core, is we don't want to fully automate educational processes. There should be a way at some point to say, this isn't working. I want to opt out. I want to talk to a teacher. I want to talk to a school leader. I need to interact with a person. Now, I bring up the AI Bill of Rights because this is a little abstract. It can apply to any area of AI, but I think you can start to use this. You can turn it into questions that you can ask to vendors as they come to you with products, or to your teachers or to your communities as they want to use particular tools. You could ask them, it's like, well, what do we know about its safety and effectiveness? Are we disclosing how we're using it? If we use it, are we delegating all control, or are we making sure a human is in the loop? That's a concept I'll come back to later. Great document for a starting point. A lot to do, I think, as a general document. A lot to do to elaborate it to best serve education. Okay, and I mentioned human in the loop. This is a key recommendation of the report. The idea is much of this use of AI has the nature of noticing a pattern, recommending an action, noticing a pattern, recommending an action. And we want people to be in the loop of those things. So in this diagram, you see always center teachers, and it documents 3 kinds of loops. There may be some support for learning that's while you're doing teaching, like helping a teacher automatically queue up a resource they want to show, or suggesting a next problem that students ought to work on. There's a lot of use of AI right now where teachers are starting to prepare for teaching, for example, making lesson plans. And there's some on reflecting on teaching, where AI tools are helping teachers listen to recordings of their own class sessions and notice things about the classroom discourse they might want to improve. And as the broadest cycles of the loop is, how do we design these tools? How do we decide which ones we're going to use? How do we evaluate them and decide how they need to be improved? So we want humans in the loop of all of that. We want educators involved in all of that. So let me try to make that yet more specific for you. And this is less so in the report. Some of it draws on that report, but some of this is my thinking from the research I've done about things. And I'm just going to give you some look-fors as you think about uses of generative AI in your communities. And I'm going to go students, teachers, assessments. With students, one thing we saw with personalized learning is it often had an underlying deficit model. In other words, it would say, we're going to find what the student is having trouble with, what they don't know, what they're missing, and we're going to fill that pothole, and then they're going to get back on track. Well, deficit models have problems educationally, and AI is starting to have the capabilities to understand what assets students are bringing to the table and help us notice those capabilities. So, is it helping us lean into the asset side, or is it promulgating the deficit model? Is it helping us with the variability we actually see in our schools? Or is it only branching on some very simple variables? For example, I've studied math products that are adaptive, and very often there's only two variables in there. And one of them is like, how did you do on the last three problems? Well, that's a very limited notion of learner variability. Do they let the teacher be in the loop? Again, really critical. For teachers, let's go to that. Is it going to save time for our teachers? When they save that time, is it helping them focus more on their learners? And when they focus on their learners, is it helping them take it to the next level? So let me give you a quick example of taking it to the next level. We have talked with a group of teachers. We've been working with a group of teachers that wants to integrate computer science learning experiences, computational thinking, into lesson plans for other subject matter. And they found that very hard to do. They found with ChatGPT, they could generate some starter lesson plans based on their own lesson plans that would start to get them going in the right direction. And then they hand edited and made those plans real. But that helped them get over a hump on a hard to attain goal, which is integrating computational thinking into, say, their math lesson plan. So is it helping us do that, or is it just making things incrementally better? And in assessment, are we measuring what matters? We're getting closer to that ideal. Is it helping us not only to get a measurement that we believe in, but to what degree? I'm not a huge fan of the dashboards we've seen on many commercial products, because often it's really hard to figure out what to do on the basis of those dashboards. So is it really enabling us to be more adaptive, or is it just measuring stuff and giving us more numbers? These are some things I would want to look for and ask. More questions you could ask. This is based on the report. The graphic on the right, I'm not going to go through it all, but it's kind of a summary of each section of the report and the key concern that section of the report raised. And these are some recommendations from all that listening we did as to what the key questions ought to be as you think about choosing to use AI or not. You don't have to. The report argues very strongly that we don't want to be entranced by the mystique of the technology, by the magic. We want to start with reminding ourselves, what is our portrait of a graduate? What is our vision for learning? And is this in alignment to that? Does it protect privacy and security? We want to ask vendors, what data did you use when you created that AI model? And you want to be cautious. Did it include districts like ours, students like ours? Was that data set just found somewhere, or was it a really good fit to the problem they were trying to solve? You want to ask vendors, how are you guarding against bias? Because if anyone tells you there's no bias in their AI model, they are lying to you. All these models have biases in them because they're all based on historical data. So you want vendors who are aware of that problem and are doing something with it. How are educators involved in designing this? Does it make sense on the ground? How are humans in the loop when we use it? or is it taking responsibility away from people? And what evidence do you have that it works? Now, my belief is that all the generative AI uses are super new, and now's not the time to rush into large adoption. It's the time for low stakes exploration, and that exploration should be about building capacity in school teams. It should be about developing guidelines and guardrails. It should be getting ready time. And you need exposure, you need practice, you need experience. But I would be very nervous about large scale adoption because these generative AI technologies are just so new. It's been very little time for real testing. And so I'm getting close to wrapping up here with my remarks. In fact, that is it. So bringing us back to the Pandora's box. Look, what I hope I've helped you with in the few minutes we've shared together is there's all kinds of things sitting in this box. But if we educate ourselves to ask some of the right questions, and if we bring our vision to it and not just like, hey, let's see what's in this. But if we really drive it from our vision about where we're trying to go, I think this could be a really good thing, really worth pursuing. I'm with those educators who are excited about this. But what we don't want to do is just take this box someone handed to us, open up, and hey, let's see what happens. Therein lies a lot of difficulties. So thanks for your time today, and I'll turn it back over.
Thank you.